Welcome to Cooking with Bailey. I'm going to show you my secret recipe to make the perfect CISV activity. Or chocolate chip cookies, same thing.
5, 4, 3, 2.
So before starting any activity, it's really important to have a plan set out ahead of time. So like I have a recipe sheet for cookies. We have a CISV planning sheet that it will be linked below that will go through how to create an activity and all the steps you need to plan out beforehand. To make sure that you have all of your materials or ingredients set up beforehand. The French like to call this mise en place in cooking. So I have all my ingredients set out in their exact measurements, so it makes it really easy when I start to actually make the cookies. Okay, so now that the batter is almost done, you can take it out of the mixer. And we're going to do my favorite part, adding the chocolate chips. So you should make sure that there's always a little bit of fun in every activity you do. And for me, that's chocolate chips. These are going to be the best chocolate chip cookies ever. Now that it's done, we are going to plate them on the baking sheet and put them in the oven. Okay, so my favorite little hack is to use an ice cream scooper or a melon baller, depending on what size cookies you want. In the oven, they're ready to go. While cookies are baking, we're going to talk about the ask model, which should be guiding how you make your activities throughout the start to the end process. So, the ask model stands for attitudes, skills, and knowledge. And so the attitudes, this is like how we think and how we behave. So this is what you want your participants to take away from. So being open-minded, having flexibility, willingness to include others, and responsibility for actions and decisions. So that would be an example of what you would have the kids learn from the attitudes side. So skills, this is what you want your participants to have the ability to do after they do the activity. So this could be communicating, leadership, self-reflection, or problem solving. And the final part of the ask model is the knowledge. So what do you want your participants what types of information do you want them to gain from the activity? So this would be like population dynamics, learning about community concerns, geographical facts, or environmental issues. So all of these factor into making a great activity. So there's also different types of themes that you can incorporate into the activities. And a good place to start for those would be to think about the 4 main pillars of CISV education. So those would be sustainable development, diversity, human rights, and conflict and resolution. So under the sustainable development umbrella, you could talk about ways to promote being economically and socially well, or protecting the environment and having responsible use of resources. For the diversity side, we can learn about the identity of the individual and also how they relate to their existence in a wider community. Talking about human rights, this is how humans and rights affect every aspect of our lives on a daily basis. And also, we could talk about how violations lie at the root of our problems. And then talking about conflict and resolution, this is the theme of the year this year, but it talks about how conflicts arise and what we can do to find a peaceful resolution. So I chose to bake cookies for my activity. There's actually a progression of activities that you can do to build trust in a community in your camp or wherever you're doing your activities. So typically you start with name games, getting to know each other, building that kind of forming aspect of the camp. And then you move on to team building, which would be the storming and the norming part of your activity. And then you move on to trust activities, which is nearing the end of the camp. That's how when you're performing really well. And then at the end, you're going to adjourn and have more discussions and more reflective activities. So timer's ready. Okay, so perhaps the most important part of the activity is the debrief. So after you do the activity, you reflect, generalize, and apply. And we remember this by calling it Dr. Ga. So, reflect, this basically is when you ask your participants to think about how the activity went. So my brother and I, he's joined me, and we're going to reflect on how our cookies turned out. So, ooh, even from breaking them, they're super gooey.
It's a really fun activity.
It was really fun. So we reflected on how the activity went, thought it was a lot of fun. They took cookies, they taste really good. And then we're going to generalize it. So how does the recipe analogy apply to the greater world?
It explains life because generally you have to prepare for what you're going to do in the future if you want to do it well.
Exactly, just like we're doing, talking about CISV activities. And then you would apply your activity to something that the participants can take away and maybe even do a mosaic about it in your chapter. So we might bake cookies and donate them to our organization in our chapter. That would be a great example of an apply that relates to our baking cookie activity. Thank you so much for joining us and baking cookies and baking the perfect CISV activity. We hope that you take this to your chapter and bake some cookies. Cheers!